So I'm going to cut the scripture a little short. You'll get the gist of it, and you know it anyway. From the 20th chapter of John. Now the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb early while it was still dark and saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. Then she ran and came to Simon Peter and to the other disciple whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken away the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Peter therefore went out, and the other disciple, and were going to the tomb. So they both ran together, and the other disciple outran Peter, and came to the tomb first. And he, stooping down and looking in, saw the linen cloths lying there, yet he didn't go in. Then Simon Peter arrived, following him, and he went into the tomb. And he saw the linen cloths lying there, and the handkerchief that had been around his head, not lying with the linen cloths, but folded together in a place by itself. Then the other disciple, who came to the tomb first, went in first, and also. And he saw, and he believed. For as yet they did not know the scripture, that he must rise again from the dead. Then the disciples went away to their own homes. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Richard Gribble is a minister and a story writer. And as I looked for something to lead into my sermon this morning, I found a story that is a wonderful lead-in story, and I cannot take any credit for it. I want you to know that. This man is much better than I am. And I feel like when I tell you where it came from, I'm not plagiarizing. Got it? All right. There was a young pastor. His name was David Johnson, and he was all ready for his Easter service. He had graduated from seminary just 3 months before taking his position as the pastor at the Maple Street Community Church in a small town. And he was brimming with all of the latest and the most interesting, up-to-date theology. So on Saturday morning before Easter, he put the finishing touches on his sermon. And then he grabbed his wife and he said, "I want you to listen to this. This is really gonna be good." And he told her that his sermon was based on cutting-edge theology by Paul Tillich and by an older theologian, but we still consider today cutting-edge, Soren Kierkegaard. And that he was just going to preach cutting-edge, up-to-date philosophical theology, and he was excited. And his wife listened to him. She looked over her glasses at him, and she put the glasses back up on her nose, and she just shook her head. And he didn't seem to notice that. Well, early that Saturday evening, David had to go back to the church for a rehearsal of the sunrise service that was going to be early the next morning. And when the practice ended, one of the teenagers, one of those young people, said, "Pastor, can you give me a ride home?" And of course, the pastor said he would be glad to do so, but he did tell the young man that he would have to give him directions. Well, with this fellow pointing the way, David took him to his house without any incident whatsoever. But when he left, he realized that he couldn't remember, did he turn right at the end of the gravel road, or did he turn left at the end of the concrete road? And what had taken him 10 minutes to get from his house to the young man, from the church to the young man's house, in 20 minutes of driving around, he realized he was dreadfully lost. Had no idea where he was. And he kept driving and looking, and like most men, he figured, I will get there very soon. And then all of a sudden, guess what happened? The car sputtered, and it went about 50 yards, and it ran out of gas. Well, David was overcome with anxiety. It was 10 p.m. on Holy Saturday evening. He was lost. He was out of gas. And he had to be at church at 6 o'clock in the morning to set up for the sunrise service. So he got out of the car and he began to walk, and it was dark. Well, he walked for about 10 minutes when he saw some bright lights on up ahead as he walked forward. And as he drew closer, he could see that those bright lights said, "The Boondocks." Great neon lights that said, "The Boondocks." And everyone in that town, including Pastor David, knew what the Boondocks were. It was one of the seediest, most low-rent taverns there in the town. And as he walked up to that front door, he looked around in the parking lot, and Floyd, there were probably about 25 Harleys in that parking lot. And that kind of made him a little bit nervous. And he opened the door, and when he opened the door into the Boondocks, the stench of rancid beer and tobacco nearly knocked him over. He didn't see anybody that he recognized in there, and that's probably a good thing and a bad thing. So he walked into this bar, and he wondered what his church members might think if they saw their new minister there in the Boondocks. Well, David approached the bar, and he was intending on asking the bartender, how to get out of there, and asking to get a ride to town. But instead, Pastor David found himself ordering a Coke. And he sat down just for a moment, and he noticed a billiard table behind him. And soon, he had taken off his jacket, and he had put his name on the list that he would play the winner. And soon, he was engaged in a game of pool. Well, David had spent his life with a pool table in his house. And even though he was a minister, he shot very, very good pool. And tonight, he wasn't very good. He was fantastic. Twice he ran the table after the break. And there was a biker there who noticed what was going on. And after the second game, this biker, whose name was Turk, challenged David to a game. So Turk took off his sleeveless coat, and he got his cue off the wall, and they played 3 games. And Pastor David beat the fool out of Turk the first game, and the second game, and the third game. And at that point, Turk took his cue, put it back up on the rack, conceded defeat, and announced to all of those there in the bar that this man's name, who he did not know at this point, was now to be known as Shark. And then he asked 2 questions. He says, "What is your name?" And David said, "My name is David." And then Turk said, "What do you do to be such a good pool player?" And David thought quickly, and he thought, "I know what I do." And he summoned every bit of courage that he had, and he said to them, "I am the minister at Maple Street Community Church." And all those people in that bar were shocked, because there probably had never been a minister in that church ever. And they began to mumble and talk among themselves, but all of a sudden, back in the background, a voice. Turk's voice. The man that David had just beaten 3 times. Turk's voice bellowed, "Quiet!" And immediately, the mood in that bar changed, and the patrons, one by one, began to ask questions. And as they developed a trust in Pastor David, they started telling their stories. "I'm so loud, I woke Millie up. Bad me, my bad." When Turk's turn came, he said, "I've never been to church in my whole life. My mother was never married, so people told her that she was not good enough for any church." He said, "I've never been to Sunday school either. What I know about the Bible comes from what I've seen on television. He said, I know tomorrow is Easter, but he said, I have no earthly idea what we celebrate at Easter. And then there was silence, and all those in the bar turned, and they trained their eyes on Pastor David. And Pastor David then began to tell them about Jesus. He saw his invitation to speak, and he saw that he needed to respond. And he told them about Jesus' birth and how when Jesus was old enough, he began this public ministry, and David told them that those who were rich and powerful in that time had little respect or little time for Jesus, because Jesus reached out in a special way to those who were despised by the rich and the famous. Jesus did many wonderful things, Pastor David told them. He cured many of diseases, and he forgave sins, and he demonstrated love in every word and action and everything in his life. And most of the people detested him. Although he had done all these wonderful things and taught people about the love of God, that hatred was there by the people. So on Friday, a Friday that's called Good Friday, in a city called Jerusalem, there was a kangaroo court, and it agreed that this man named Jesus was guilty of high crimes, and he was led to be crucified wearing a crown of thorns. And all but a couple of his friends deserted him. They abandoned him. After he died on that cross, some of his friends took him down and laid him in a tomb. And while the story continued, all of a sudden you could hear sniffles in that room. You could see grown men stifling the urge to cry. And David told the men that on Sunday morning Jesus' friends went to the tomb, just like Amy talked about, to visit. But they met two angels, and those angels told them that, Jesus isn't here. He's gone. He's risen. And he is alive. And then later that day, Jesus appeared to his friends, those same friends that had abandoned him just a couple of days before. Turk and his other friends were impressed, but they're like we are sometimes. They were skeptical. That's a crazy story, Turk said. And David looked at him and he said, it's a crazy world, my friend. But the truth is, our God can turn losers into winners. And he demonstrated that God will always be there for us when he raised his Son from the dead. God, in his love for his creation, destroyed death forever. And then the preacher remembered why he was there. And David told Turk about his car problem, and quickly the rugged biker amazingly was able to siphon gas out of one of the cars that was out in the parking lot. Happened to have just the right tools in his trunk. Put the gas into David's car, gave him directions, and sent him on his way. When he arrived home, his wife, who was concerned about him because his phone out in the boondocks, what did it say on it? Out of service. She hadn't been able to get him. And it was late, and he needed to get his bed rest. But he told her, I have to rewrite my sermon. Something had happened inside of him. The next day, David did not talk about a new being. He didn't talk about modern theology. He just simply told the story of how God raised Jesus from the dead, and in the process gave him and all of us new life and hope. People in the congregation thought the sermon was pretty good. But what really got them talking was the strange group of visitors down